afternoon, good morning, depending on your time zone. Welcome to our Data Plus Women Zurich event. My name is Annabelle Rincon, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. So what is Data Plus Women for the one that is the first time to join? It's a networking group for women working with or around data. And our goal is really to promote and celebrate the achievement of these successful women. If you are interested to speak, you can always contact us. It will be really our pleasure. The next event is in July, the 14th, the day of the French Revolution. So thank you, Olivia. So Olivia created a nice slide for me. I have been selected as Tableau Visionary. It's a very, very big achievement for me, and thank you to everyone who voted. So like I said, just like a very quick presentation, my name is Annabelle. I am leading the Tableau Center of Enablement for Swiss Bank. My patients are Tableau, my dog, and chocolates. And plus of Data Plus Women, I'm also leading another initiative, which is a Tableau user group analytic. And with me, I'm not doing that alone. And I couldn't do that without the great Olivia, who is a data scientist at Migros. And Olivia will have the great honor to introduce our speaker today.
All right, thank you, Annabelle, for the nice introduction, and hello to everyone from my side as well. Maybe good morning, good evening. I'm super happy to see that people are joining from all over the world, and that is really the best compliment we can get. I'm super excited to introduce our speaker, Sridevi, today. As you can see, she will talk today about perfectionism, how to actually get away from perfectionism, and I guess we will get some advice from her as well. We will see. So before we start, a quick introduction. Who is Sridevi? She is her title at least says organization psychologist. What that really means, I guess you can explain later to us as well. And she is working for Barry Callebaut. So for those of you who don't know it, it's actually the largest cocoa and chocolate manufacturer in the world, I think. So it's really amazing to have you here. And what is exceptional and what I really like about you, that also you support and mentor female leaders on top of what you're already doing. So this is, of course, we're so super happy to have you in our user group, as this is actually the main goal here. So with that, I think we're already ready to start, and I give the word to you.
Great. Thank you, Annabelle and Olivia. Very kind introduction. Really appreciate it. So just a little background. I got to know Data Plus Women because a colleague of mine called Agathe Laville, she is part of this team from Barry Callebaut and knows Data Plus Women. And so we started this conversation, I believe, last year to see, hey, what are the opportunities that we can work on where I could add some value? Because Agathe believed that something along the lines of leadership, something along the lines of, I don't want to use the word self-improvement, but honestly more on development and growth and journey. So this is my organization psychologist background kicking in. It's easy to say, oh, self-improvement, right? So it's really about one's growth and how we see ourselves professionally growing over time. So this is, I've been doing this for actually more than about 20 years now. And in the space, so I'm an organization psychologist by training. But my background that I work is in the HR space in Barry Callebaut, and I do global talent development for all of Barry Callebaut. So we look at developing and growing our leaders in the organization, and I support that strategic vision and what that means. So if I could share my screen, and then I'll be able to, if you just bear with me for a bit.
Normally on the bottom of your screen below the image, you should have a green button, share screen.
Yes, that's right. So I'm just trying to open this screen here to the top. Just bear with me for a minute and close all the rest of the documents. Okay, my apologies. I'm coming in from a meeting directly, which didn't allow me to have a little bit of breathing room as I came in. So can all of you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm gonna play it into go. Slideshow. Okay, so now you should be able to see it in full screen. Can you see that? Excellent. Okay, so I'm very delighted to be here and also to work with all the fantastic women, I'm sure, a part of the Virtual Data Plus Women group globally. And our purpose today is really to talk about perfection to Pareto. So what does that mean, right? So as Annabelle and Olivier and I were discussing, what would really make sense for particularly women who are in the tech space to develop and grow in their leadership capability, their managerial capability. I was exploring ideas with them. And one of the most important things that I hear a lot across working with different types of leaders is particularly women who are in the technical space, their ability to stand out and be able to move beyond just a technical environment and not to be seen as just an expert in a particular area. However, the second component of it is when they transition from a technical space, being a very deep expert in certain areas, and they take on leadership roles, one of the things that really impedes them is the ability to go into so much detail that they cannot see the big picture. So again, this is not anecdotal evidence. This is actual data that I work with different leaders in different parts of the organization. There's also some data around how female leadership works and what does that mean. And I don't want to just focus on female leadership. I just really want to focus on what perfection to Pareto means. I think quite a lot of you may be familiar with the terminology Pareto. So which is why I wanted to start the session with what is Pareto, right? And what the definition is. So what we will cover today in 3 key bullet points are definitions of perfectionism, leadership and perfectionism, and then we will end with just looking at how to overcome perfectionism. This is not a be all end all. I would like to have some interaction here. So we will use some chat function. So I rely on you to actively participate and ask questions towards the end. And of course, I can't give you everything on this. So I've crammed as much as I can in a very short period of time. And I'm also recommending some suggested readings as well. So if that's okay with everybody, let's get started. So this, I found this code and it's a fantastic code. And I thought, oh, amazing, not sure if I'm a perfectionist or everyone else has low standards. I mean, you cannot say anything, particularly with female, right? In the way that we dress, our hair, the color, the shoes, everything needs to be matched, and tip top. So if I could get you to interact a little bit on a scale of 1 to 10, how many of you identify as perfectionists? If you could just put in there in the chat message. Wow, I see a 10, 7 and a 10 and a 9, 6. 7.5. Wow. Okay, somebody's very precise. Okay, 8, 6, 7, 6, 8, 6. Wow, that's used to be a 10, mellowed with age, not 7. Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. Yes, age does make a difference. So, so with age comes experience, and you understand how life works, right? So, if more than 6, share a little bit. I think everybody is 6 and more. Why? Why do you think you're a perfectionist? Is there any particular traits that you're seeing that really shows that you're a perfectionist? And why do you identify as a perfectionist? In the details. Agreed. Extremely detail oriented. Feel resourceful is something that I have that others often do not have. Yes, that exactly is the code, or everyone else has low standards, right? Quality, yeah. Thank you for sharing, Nicola. Anything else? I'm sure you will think about some things and then you can put on the chat. So we get the idea. So the idea: order, preventing mistakes, clutter, chaos, inconsistency causes me stress, not wanting all. Driving people-pleasing needs. Yes, that's very true and very common amongst women. Reassure us. I feel like I'm not perfect. People will lose trust and doubt me. Wow, that's point on. That's absolutely true. If I pronounce your name correctly, Zifa. Yeah. Performance driven at work. Yes, that's true. So I think we get the picture, right? And so it's always easier to find a perfectionist in another person, but you don't realize that you're a perfectionist. So let's explore a little bit around what that means. And so if I want you to take away anything from today's session, it's this quote: continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. I cannot stress that enough. Why is this important? Because at the end of the day, perfection gives us an illusion that we are in control. And that is a message that I really want you to resonate with, because perfection gives an illusion that you are in control. We can never be in control 100%. It is just physically and humanly not possible to have that level of perfection all the time. And it's unnecessary stress on our well-being, particularly as women, to put that on ourselves. So again, I'm trying not to focus too much on women, right? So I'm trying to broadly talk about it, but I think this is something particularly that's an affliction for women. So I really want you to think a little bit about that. Continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection, something for you to take away from. So let's start with a little bit of definition. As an organization psychologist, I believe in research. So there's a definition here. Perfectionism is a personality characteristic defined by striving for flawlessness, setting exceedingly high standards for performance, accompanied by tendencies for overly critical self-evaluation and concerns about negative evaluation by others. Does that resonate with everybody? If you could raise your hands, or you could put it on the chat. Yeah, on the chat. Yeah, yes, striving for flawlessness. Yes. Right. So I'm glad that it resonates with everyone, because this is the part that when you have a problem, you need to define it. Right. So we sometimes throw around the words, what is perfectionism? I'm a perfect person, I'm a perfectionist, but sometimes just being on the same alignment. So this really talks about it, right? It really talks about having exceedingly high standards. It's about being overly critical of oneself, and also really worried about what someone else will think of you, right? If you think about it, the world is very small, that we don't live very long. Do you really want to be concerned about what others are thinking of you? Just a thought, just sharing out there, think about it. And that's what I would say. So moving on to the next slide. So what is Pareto principle? I think quite a lot of you ladies would probably be more familiar with it. So it's known as the 80-20 rule. Okay, that says that 80% of the results come from 20% of the causes, right? So particularly in the business side, it is designed to help make sure that the 20% of efforts are directly linked to outcomes that drive sales, revenue, and growth. Right? So if you look at that, the 80-20 rule in practice, it's about really identifying the few vital tasks you have determined are important to your success. And you choose to focus 20% of your time and attention on getting these done, right? Because you're looking at the big picture, right? I'm not saying, so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that details are not important. What I'm saying is you need to be able to understand when details are required, when you need to step out and look at the big picture. And more often than not, when we are dealing with senior leaders in organization, when you are working at a broader team, you're looking at focusing on 20% of your time and attention that will have 80% impact on growth, right? So just take a step back and think about that. I want to let that resonate with you. Does that resonate with you? Maybe you can put that on the chat. Does that make sense for you? Is that very difficult to sort of really deal with? You can write on the chat. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Jenny, thank you. Agreed. Yeah, it feels hard to apply to my job. Yes, that's true. Thank you for sharing that, Julianne. So it's easier said than done. Most often, it's easier said than done, right? Sometimes, as somebody said earlier, the devil is in detail. I agree. It's just difficult to apply this rule in practice. I often do a quick win and I improve it with time. Yeah, Annabelle, yeah. Agree? Sometimes. So this is what we are hoping to look at, right? If you recall at the beginning, so I said continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection, right? So it's what we call the analysis paralysis stage. So let's look at a little bit of our traits of perfectionism. So all of you said, hey, I'm perfect 8, 9. So all of that, there's a culmination of certain behaviors and insecurities in the background. So it's about fear of failure, and then procrastinate, highly critical, you have unrealistic standards, and then focusing only on the results, just on the results, nothing else. It means at the expense of burning bridges to get certain things done. Sometimes you don't worry about how you've managed your stakeholders. You've just said, hey, I've delivered on time. So forget about whether or not you've managed your stakeholders, right? So you've forgotten all about that. Yes, your delivery is important. Nobody's denying that. But how you go about doing that is so critical. And especially in multinational organizations, when we talk about looking at leaders for the future, when we look at promoting people, those key elements are looked at. So it's not just what piece, your performance that you're delivering, but it's also how you go about delivering that. That is often looked at as well. They may not necessarily voice it out. Some organizations, they are a little better at voicing that out. And then when your name comes up for promotion, people are thinking, I'm not sure. I don't think she knows how to work with people. There's always some kind of conflict in the background. She's so driven, she forgets about how do you manage people. So those are the kind of things that will come out of you, right? So yes, results is important. And how do you deal with people? So it's not and or. It's not or, it's and how you deal with people. How do you manage stakeholders? What are the different components of that? So when being in a technical role or being very much as an expert role, you need to be able to also step out of that comfort zone to be able to say, how am I managing people? Do they understand what I'm saying? Is my communication very clear? Am I just sending an email because I'm in a hurry? And then you don't think about how that message is going to land on someone else's desk. So these are all critical parts that we don't think about it because we're so data driven. We're so focused on the results. Okay, get this thing done, get things done, right? So just want to highlight that, and that's an important piece of it. So we've identified what perfectionist is, and then we've also talked about Pareto. So there are differences in perfectionism, right? So there's the healthy perfectionist, then there's the maladaptive perfectionist. So what is it? It sounds very techy and very, research-based, and I'm not sure I understand. So what this really is there is perfectionism where, again, done a little bit on research on that, where you are challenging yourself to set high goals and standards, right? And if you fail, you learn from the failure and you continue to stay engaged. It doesn't cripple you. Yeah, and I use this word here deliberately. It does not cripple you, right? In maladaptive perfectionism, what we call unhealthy perfectionism, you set such extremely high and unrealistic goals. And when you fail, you become obsessed with goal and increase efforts. You think you need to work even harder. Oh, I should have worked even harder, right? And then, or you could go the other way, or the extreme opposite, where you avoid any kind of activity altogether. So they are very extremes, right? I know I'm talking to ladies who deal with data. So this is like, your bread and butter. And data integrity is important. And making sure that it's perfect is important because that's how you draw conclusions, you make your analysis, etc. It's at the same time, when you are approaching your work, it is not about perfectionism, right? That's why you get really obsessed with goals and you think by working harder, it's almost like saying, if I do the same thing, 99 times, hopefully at 100th time, it will get better. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It is not necessarily proven that Albert Einstein said that. So I don't want to say Albert Einstein said that. There is no indicator that he said that. But that is sort of where we're going with this, right? So it gives you, it helps you to grow in different trajectory, right? And so what we want you to do is to start to get right in a little bit in the middle. Again, if you have indicated on the chat message that you're a 10, So in the next 1 year, you could set yourself some goal and say, I want to move to a 9. That is a realistic goal, not an unrealistic goal and say, no, I need to be a 5. You can't. It's just normal human nature. You just cannot make a turnaround, in such a short frame of time. So the realistic goal is from a 10, I move to a 9. And then from a 9, I move to an 8. From an 8, I move to a 7. So set realistic goals. And one of the things that they talk about, there's a lot of research done in exercise goals, and I don't need to tell you ladies, one of the reasons why we don't exercise or we go into this unhealthy maladaptive perfectionism is because we tell ourselves, we are going to lose 20 kilogram, for those of us who use kilogram as a metric system, in 3 months. Do you really think that's realistic? Think about it. It's just simply not possible. And then you put yourself through obsessive way of losing weight, just like Kim Kardashian did in 3 weeks to lose 16 pounds to fit into Marilyn Monroe's dress for the Met Gala. I don't know if I want to put myself through that. But she had a goal, right? She is a clear-cut perfectionist. Whether or not it's maladaptive or healthy, I can't speak to that because I don't have enough data to speak to that. But there is a level of perfectionism, right? She really wanted to get this right. And the way to go about it is become obsessed with goals and increase efforts, right? And then when you fail, you cannot pick yourself up. And it's always about trying to find the balance. I know we always say this, but I cannot stress this enough. Why is this important? Because it impacts your life. Maladaptive perfectionism, right, is found, again, we don't have a lot of data in the space. We have a little bit of data because this is more of a clinical study that they've done, that it leads to depression, anxiety, professional burnout, neuroticism, stress, emotional distress, obsessive compulsive disorder, low self-esteem, procrastination. Just about everything that you can think of is down here, right? A poor self-efficacy. So trust in the way that you deal with people, low altruism. That means you're not interested in somebody else's way of empathy doesn't come in. So think about that for a moment. Do you really want to put yourself through that? No, it's not. So the question is, how do you start to find the balance, right? Well, before we go into how, there's a cute little quiz that I found. If you could, maybe what I will do is I'll create the link here. I'll copy and paste the link here on the chat. If you could take this quick quiz, should take you 5 minutes, very easy to read. If not, we can do 6-7 minutes. Click on the link and it brings you to this page on what actually, quick assessment, 10 questions on how you are stacked up against other people who have done this general population survey. I'll wait on the side. Let me know when you're done on the chat.
It's very quiet now.
Should I paste it again, the link?
No, I think it's okay. It's on the chat. We can see it.
It's on the chat, the link. So just click on the link from the chat. Ah, okay. I see. Okay, so everyone, apologies. Here you go. Now you should be able to see. You're welcome. I see Olivia is done. Did the questions resonate with you, Olivia?
Yes, they did actually. I'm curious to see what the interpretation of my score is.
Yeah, it's a simple report, nothing fancy, right? So it's just a simple quiz.
I have also done, and I was thinking that when I used to be stressed by the amount of work to do, I was just taking a piece of paper and make a list and prioritize, and being very organized for me, it's a way to reduce my stress.
Yeah, and that works for different people, right? So different people have different ways and methods to do that. Thank you, Veronica. So maybe I'll give another 2 more minutes. I think we can give another 2 more minutes for people to complete. Great, thank you, Julian. Excellent, thank you, Savedra. Excellent, so most people are finishing. So for those who have finished, could you put on the chat, how did that questions resonate with you? Do you feel like, wow, that really speaks to me? It makes sense. I am a perfectionist. Does that give you some data to help you, understand where you are? Very spot on. Yeah, thank you, Janessa. Yes, very insightful. Yeah. I'm a perfectionist, and loudly and proudly saying it. It often resonated with me, unfortunately, too, right, to cover. When I was younger, I was like this, that's nice. And well, that the hindsight of age. As said, I was able to respond quickly. Yeah. So I just wanted to give you a moment on the quiz to reflect what that means for you, right? And where you can continue to work on in looking at the questions. Again, you can take the questions anytime, right? So look at the questions out of the 10, hey, maybe these 2 I need to work on. So that could be your development that you say, these are 2 areas that I want to work on, or pick one. Again, not being an overly perfectionist and say, I want to work on all 10, reminding you, pick one and no more than 2, I would recommend, and say that, hey, this is something for me to work on. If you're interested, that's actually proper research-based questions that I managed to find that will be helpful is from Frost's multidimensional perfectionism scale. This is more towards clinical psychology. It's 35 questions. I will be able to send them to Annabelle and Olivia, and also the link, so you can download it, look at it. This one goes a little bit more in depth because it's clinical psychology. It's not just behavioral behavioral component. So what it does is that it looks at, how you were younger, and what your parents taught you and how have you shaped. So that might also give you some ideas as to where some of the areas resonate with you. So this is 35 questions, and I'll send that to all of you, and you can access those. So now let's move to the part on leadership and perfectionism. So interestingly, as I was researching for this talk, there is no meta-analysis on anything on leadership and perfectionism. This was fascinating insight for me. It is a very under-researched topic in all of leadership traits. It's fascinating for me because this is by far one of the things that really cripples people. Maybe because a lot of women show perfectionism, maybe that's why it's under-researched. Just like anything to do with women, it's under-researched, right? So that could be it. But it's a very under-researched topic, which is really fascinating. So anything on evidence-based workplace interventions is missing. I did manage to find, if you are interested, I have a 35-page analysis, research paper. I can also send that to you if you are interested. I'm a savant when it comes to reading research papers because that's my bread and butter, but you're more than welcome. I'll share with you. If you're interested, look at it. It's fascinating insights that they looked at as well. There are 2 studies in Germany that was done a little bit of research, but the sample size was so small that it didn't really create a lot of significant information that we can make something use of it. But what was interesting to note is that when it comes to leadership and perfectionism, there's a lot of anecdotal kind of evidence, right? So where the inevitability of micromanagement kicks in when you are a perfectionist leader. So think about that. What you don't want, the last thing you want to be known as a leader is a micromanager. It is exhausting. It is really exhausting. It takes up so much, it consumes you and takes up so much of your head space and your emotional space and your heart because it's so heavy and stressful. So remember, it is against all principles. These are polar opposites. They're supposed to be north and instead of north and south, they need to be north and east together. So they have to be polar opposites. When you look at leadership, perfectionism cannot come into play because the micromanagement kicks in. The ability to avoid failure and prevent a negative outcome kicks in, meaning that people are seeking to avoid failure. It is just nearly impossible to do that. It's just simply not possible, right? And it also encourages people to hide mistakes and weaknesses. Is that the kind of leader that you want to be? Think about that for a moment. Or as a manager, is that the kind of manager you want to be? Because you are dealing with adults. They are not your children. Do you need to monitor them in that way? Right? Deliverable is one thing, right? So you hold people accountable. That's important. I'm not denying that. But the extent of which that you are over controlling every single outcome because you don't want to fail, it impacts your health, it impacts you, your ability to be efficient, effective, productive, all goes down, right? So maybe you want to share a little bit of your challenges in leading people as a perfectionist, if you are. So Annabelle wrote, with age, I made my life easier. I don't care about what people think about my crazy hair, fun earrings, or colorful personality. It's a challenge as a parent too. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Annabelle. Any other thoughts? I'll give a minute for people to write their thoughts. Okay, I think people are formulating and thinking about it. That's all right. Let's move on. So again, aha moment for all of you, right? Leadership and perfectionism do not go well together. So then the question becomes, what is it, right? So for me, I found this quote and I thought it really resonates. At its root, perfectionism isn't really about a deep love of being meticulous. It's about fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of disappointing others, fear of failure, and fear of success. There is a book called 4,000 Weeks, and I'll recommend that later. And 4,000 weeks, what it means is that that's the average span of a human being in the world. 4,000 weeks, think about it. That's all we have in our lifetime. You know, we are planning, you know, in 2023, we will do this, 2024, we will do this. But think about it, we only have 4,000 weeks, an average span of 80-year life. And in that lifetime, now you know what you know. Do you want to be thinking and operating from a fear-based perspective? The answer is no. There is a correct answer, and the answer is no. You don't want to be doing that. And so think about that for a moment. What is it that's driving you to that perfectionist state, right? Again, it's not a simple black and white situation, right? Every situation is very contextual in nature. It may be that you're required to be. Then the question becomes, how do you make it a little bit more palatable for you, palatable for others? And that's where your communication needs to increase in a way where you are talking about the importance of getting certain things done and right and accountability without losing yourself in the process, right? And that takes time, and that takes you to talk to different people, have a different perspective, have an understanding. Hey, am I making sense? Am I going crazy? Does the project seem to be a little bit derailed? And that's why it's important to have that buddy in your organization, a sponsor, a mentor, anyone that you feel is your cheerleader, to have those kind of conversations to help you get on track and what that means as well. That always helps. So we've talked a lot about, sort of perfectionism. We've talked about, we've taken a quiz and now you have a little bit of knowledge. So how do you overcome it, right? So again, I don't have a lot of research data to show you. A lot of them are anecdotal, okay? And I'm very happy to hear and put it on the chat what you think. For me, the first one is know thyself. Trigger points for perfectionism. When does that kick in? Right, know that, because we all know that if you're self-aware, you know when those moments are. For me, I know that when I don't have enough sleep, when it gets closer, I think we are all ladies here, so I can openly share, when I get closer to my period, a week before, I don't have enough sleep. It's just how our bodies work, right? Bye. Just saying bye to a colleague. So I know that happens. And so when I don't have enough sleep, I don't trust myself to make certain kind of decisions or conclusions. So I look to my husband and I tell him, I'm tired. Tell me what I can do differently because I cannot make these decisions, right? So it's about really understanding your trigger points when perfection kicks in. Learn to read the signs, or tea leaves rather. Learn to understand when those kicks in. When you don't have enough sleep, when you have not eaten properly, when perhaps your children are misbehaving, for whatever reason, they're high on sugar. There could be plenty of reasons, but know yourself when that kicks in, because then that will allow you to become more observant and aware of yourself in how you are interacting with other people around you. Again, this is also not about just work practice, right? It's also about your husband, your spouse, whoever that's around you, because you may lose your control by snapping at them. So know that, again, we cannot get this 100% right. So that's the irony in this. Perfectionism cannot, to come out of perfectionism, you cannot be perfect about getting that perfect. That's the irony in this. But remember, you're trying to observe yourself. Another approach is, don't look at a particular situation as simply binary. There is never a 1 or a 0 situation. Very rarely in life, there is a 1 or a 0 situation. It is always in the gray zone. So when you approach a particular situation in workplace, for example, you have a certain delivery of a deadline of a project, there could be, and if a certain person cannot deliver it in time for you to be able to get that project done, there could be other extenuating circumstances. Know how to understand that surrounding situation. It's so important. This, in an organization, we look at that very clearly, and we use a certain terminology in organizations called learning to deal and work in ambiguity. This is something that we look for in all leaders, because in a leadership role, when you're managing people, as you progress in your career, there are going to be many situations where there's a lot of ambiguity. You just don't have control with having clear understanding of what that is. So it's really important that you train yourself. Again, this is like a muscle, right? You can train yourself to think about a particular situation, not only 1 or a 0. It's never binary. Focusing on the big picture. Again, this comes back to the Pareto principle, right? What is the big picture? What is the bigger relevancy here? What are we trying to solve? And some things you're just going to have to let go. Right? And that's where I focus on what is in your control. I cannot stress this enough. And this is something that I learned personally earlier in my career. And that really helped me give a better mental, I would say, attitude. Because if I have to think about everything that needs to be in control, I just couldn't function anymore. So I really needed to step back and tell myself, this is not in my control. I have spoken to my bosses and informed them, these are the particular situations, these are what is happening, this is what it means, how I'm communicating. So then I learned how to communicate differently with my stakeholders, helping them understand why certain things cannot be done. And then I take myself out of the situation and say, that's not in my control. And that helped. And then for those of you in leadership positions, in managerial position, delegation leads to success. I highly recommend this, right? Delegation leads to success. Because when you are delegating to people, it means you are no longer a micromanager. You oversee, and where you want to be in the managerial or leadership position is to be coaching others how they can be better. You shouldn't be able to do their job. Again, we are all dispensable. I'm sorry, but that's just a fact of life. Yeah, they could always hire another data scientist. They could always hire somebody capable than you. So that's why you need to be able to find your traits beyond just your technical skills to set yourself apart. And one of those things is about dealing with ambiguity, leading in an ambiguous environment, delegating with people. How do you work with people? How do you manage stakeholders? How do you communicate with stakeholders? These are things that are seen in an organization. So delegation leads to success, certain things that you can really step away from. Just before I end, I want to leave this quotation with you. Don't aim for perfection, aim for better than yesterday. This puts you in the healthy perfectionist range rather than the maladaptive perfectionist stage, right? Aim for better than yesterday. It's what we call in a supply chain manufacturing environment, continuous improvement. We call it, there's a specific terminology in a manufacturing environment called continuous improvement. It was created by Toyota, the car company called Toyota. So they have something called Nemoto principles. And part of the Nemoto principles, it's about continuous improvement. So as you know, the Japanese, they're well known. I don't know if we have our Japanese colleagues on the line. They're well known for perfection, right? So it's all about how do you do better? Continuous improvement. It's about getting better every single day. That's what it's about, especially as leader. So before I end, I want to leave some books with you that I have personally read, and they are fabulous and entertaining and also eye-opening. So something called Rising to Power, The Journey of Exceptional Executives. It gives you a perspective of what it means, where you have to let go of perfectionism. This I highly recommend for all ladies to take, The Likability Trap, How to Break Free and Succeed as You Are. This is the 4,000 weeks that I mentioned, Time Management for Mortals. Read that book, it will completely change your perspective. For me, it was such an aha moment. So I told my husband, there's a story behind this. After I read the book, and I told my husband, sweetheart, we only have 4,000 weeks in the world. In our lifetime. And then he goes, he's an introvert, but he's also a logical person, right? So he's all about data and logic. And he said, oh, that means we only have half of it left. I said, that sounds very depressing. So 4,000 weeks, it's a big aha moment. I highly recommend you reading it. And something called Overcoming Perfectionism. This is an audiobook that you can get from Amazon or any other place where you get your audiobooks. Highly recommend it. Take time going through the books, because these are not, like your fiction books that you just read quickly. There are some really powerful elements that will allow you to reflect upon and also change not just you as a leader or you in a professional setting in an organization, but also you as how you approach your life. So it really makes an impact, and I highly, highly recommend that. So the key takeaways, we started off the session today with the definition of understanding perfectionism. We looked at leadership and perfectionism, and we realized it's an under-researched topic, particularly because it affects a lot of women. And so, which is very common to see that. and I shared with you some 5 key takeaways on how to overcome perfectionism. So that brings me to the end of the topic. Any questions, anyone? Am I on time, Olivia and Annabelle?
Perfect. Right on point.
Excellent. So I'm very happy to hear any questions. I think on the chat, there are a couple of things. Some book recommendations. Yeah, you're welcome.
We had a question about if you think that trauma can be linked to perfectionism.
Okay, so that's a clinical psychology. I'm unfortunately not trained in it. But what I have read, there does seem to be that link. Again, I would recommend that you talk to a therapist or somebody who will be able to help you understand that. But yes, from what I've read and understood, there is a link to it. But I don't know whether it's a causation, whether it's a correlation or a causation. That I can't speak to that.
I am posing in the chat some job offer Pareto.
Thank you. How do we start to change the external expectations of perfectionism for women? Again, I don't know if I would answer it from a woman's perspective. I don't know who asked the question. Let me just look at that. Janessa, yeah. I don't know if I would answer that question from a woman's perspective, Janessa. I think this is an affliction for everyone. It is just a little bit more heightened for women, only because women are, especially women leaders, are put under a huge microscope, right? Far more than men will. And there's a fabulous book I didn't recommend here, but if you're interested, you should read a book called Incompetent Leaders, Incompetent Men Who Become Leaders. Fascinating insights, written by a man who is an organization psychologist. Why incompetent men lead organizations is a fascinating book. So I think the way that I would say is start to look at what is important to you at the end of the day. You know, if a specific external expectation is important to you and you think it's relevant and worthwhile working on, then of course you can work on that. But for me, it comes back to your values. What are driven by your values? What drives you? And that's why, how do you overcome perfection? The first point that I put is know thyself. Know yourself. And sometimes, particularly as women, in our 20s, we are so encouraged to start getting married and having babies and all of that. Nobody actually says, hey, take the time in your 20s to explore yourself. I mean, of course, there's all this fun, Sex in the City and all these, fun dramas and movies that says, oh, you need to sleep with as many people as possible. Yes, that's fun, right? I'm talking about beyond that fun element of it. Knowing yourself. When you invest in yourself, you know yourself better. You know what you want, right? And that allows you to have a control which is healthy, right? And so I cannot stress this enough. And I always talk to my young mentees, my female young mentees that I talk to, in your 20s, that's the time that you're making mistakes, both professionally and personally. But the idea is not just to say, oh, in my 20s, I'm okay to make mistakes, but what are you learning from it, right? So that is such a foundation in how we set. And then what we can avoid is getting into this 30s and our 40s, trying to make up for the time that we didn't spend in our 20s, creating a foundation on how we want to deal with life, right? Hindsight is 20/20, but I highly recommend that to everybody. And then Alice said, I never realized that I'm a perfectionist. After hearing your talk, I matched all of them. Eye-opening. Thank you for that. Thank you, Alice. And then and Annabelle, thank you for putting job offers. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how many data scientists that we are looking at right now, but yes. It's a great organization and we get chocolates every day, just to let you know. We have chocolates everywhere in the office, just to let you know. Yeah, any other questions? Anything that will be helpful? I'm happy to stay, or if you want a voiceover. Does the experience to fail, let's see, let me look at this question. Does the experience to fail help to overcome perfectionism? I don't know, that depends on the kind of failure. The failure is situational in context, right? So if you are failing in perhaps a specific high caliber project with a lot of investment, then the question becomes, what is your lesson learned in that, right? And so are you able to overcome such a high caliber failure? Right? That's a lesson in it yourself. So are you able to, so it's beyond just perfectionism, right? It's failure itself. Can you deal with failure? So that's another thing altogether. It's not just perfectionism, but can you deal with failure? So it's very contextual in nature. I don't know if I would say that it helps you overcome perfectionism, but the way to do that is, what is the lesson learned in that? That's what I would say. That's why we call it the healthy perfectionism. I hope that answers your question. Alice, do you have any advice on overcoming fear of failure? Again, depends on the type of failure it is. I think one thing it's almost, what is your biggest fear of the failure? So it's about going in depth on what is it that triggers you to have that fear for the failure. Is it about shame? Is it about your ability to get back up after the failure? So there could be many components. So again, That's why I wanted to start the session with the definition of perfectionism, right? Because sometimes we use certain terminologies that we think all of us on the same page. We are not, right? So what is that failure? So you need to define that failure. You need to know what is it, what is the root cause of it, if I can use that terminology. What is the 8D analysis? The root cause of the fear that you have. That will be helpful. Alice said, I recently failed many final rounds of interviews. Each time I heard the rejection is very hard to accept. Every time when I was on the final rounds of interview, I felt very nervous. Yeah, Alice, this is hard because there you are, you feel like you've given your 100%. This is fear of rejection, right? So this is about being rejected. So then the question becomes, are you able to continue to put yourself out there? Or at every different interview, did they give you some feedback that was helpful? If they didn't give feedback, could you ask them for feedback? And that could be part of your interview that you asked. And setting yourself up for, should we say, a mindset shift. You could go into the interview confidently and say, hey, I would love to get this job. And these are my qualifications. This is why I'm very qualified to get this role. At the same time, even if I don't get the job, I would love to get your feedback. So you putting yourself out there and saying, I would love to give you feedback so that I can continue to work on myself. That shows that you have a great attitude coming into an organization and people will remember you for it. Yeah. So I would recommend that, Alice, to do that. And I'm really sorry. I hope you get other opportunities and hope it works out for you. Any other questions? If not, I'm happy to end early. No issues. But happy to stay on and answer any questions. Yeah, Alice, like I said, it takes quite long to pick yourself up. Again, it's the fear of rejection, right? So one thing to know is what is available beyond just applying for jobs. Like applying for jobs and getting a job is one thing. What is it that you have going on in the rest of your life? So there is some research that connects you to gratefulness. And I know this is a terminology that's been thrown around in the last 3-4 years, being grateful, write a grateful journal, write every night a grateful journal. If you can't write it, that's okay. It's perfectly fine. I don't write a grateful journal, but I just think about it. I take a moment on my way back home from work and say, okay, what am I grateful for today? The fact that the sun is shining in Zurich, the fact that, I am healthy and I can walk, So I think about those things. Again, it doesn't need to be very tedious going into the perfectionist mode and writing a grateful journal because you read somewhere that you need to write a grateful journal. If that works for you, do it. If that doesn't, you don't have to do it. You can just think about it, right? Because your thoughts are very powerful. I think one of the things is what else is in your life, Alice, that I would recommend that you look at that helps give you that perspective, right? And then, and there is also some research that connects you to have positive thoughts that connects you to positive outcome. So you think about a positive outcome that will happen. Again, it's easier said than done. It's something that you have to change, you shift your mindset. It takes time. It is not going to magically appear overnight, but the more thoughts you have, the more negative thoughts you have, and that is research-based, the more you ruminate, the more it becomes difficult for you to get out of the situation. So you're just circling around in that whole thing. And so the question becomes, what can you do to take a step back? Who do you have as somebody who can help you give a bigger picture? That we are all going to have difficult moments in our life. So the question becomes what kind of attitude you want to have to approach it. That's what I would recommend and I would do personally as well. I hope that's helpful, Alice. Oh, that's great, Anita. Fantastic. Here we go. That's a great connection.
I just wanted to share that when I arrived in Zurich, I couldn't find a job for 2 years. So I failed I have very few interviews, and the one I failed was on the last round. So it was very, very frustrating. I continue, and I have to say that I I was already leading a team of data analysts in France. And when I moved to Switzerland, the first job I found was as a junior data analyst. But I took it. I learned Tableau. I returned my career. I jumped in the pool. I learned from scratch. And yeah, that was my way of going back in the game. So yeah, you never know what the future holds. So maybe all the rejection now is like for a greater path in your future.
That's fantastic. What a great story to share. Excellent. Alice. So we're coming to the end. So I'm happy to stop the questions. If you want the slides, I can share them. There's nothing proprietary. It's about all the different research that I did and put them together. I'm happy to share that with all of you. And then I will also share the research studies as well as the quiz. Happy to share that as well. And I wish you all the very best. And thank you for having me. And I'm grateful, and that's what I will think about in my journey back home, that I'm grateful that I was able to share these tips with all of you ladies today.
Thank you very much, Sridevi. Yeah, if you send us the link, we will like put them together on the email that we send to all the people who register.
Sure, very happy.
Social media too. Do you want to share some slides, Olivia, before leaving?
Already on it.
Yeah. When I said that she's the best.
I think you must see my slides now.
Yes.
All right. So again, thank you so much for taking us through. And what I really found remarkable this time is we had so much activity, so many questions. I think that just shows that everybody can just relate to what you said. So thank you for sharing and giving us some advice. So in the hope of, and I'm really sure that our next Data Plus Women will be as amazing as it was this time. So if you want to keep in touch and attend the next events, but also rewatch the video from all our past events. Also, this one was recorded. So if you're interested and you missed some parts, just go on our page. You have the QR code here on the presentation. You can also follow us, or you can just, connect with us through email, LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. And one important topic to find speakers like Sridevi, we're also looking for you. We're always looking for speaker. We're always looking for interesting topics to share and to get inspired. So please do not hesitate to contact us. Also, if you just know someone, if you want to recommend someone, it would be great if you do so. And with that, we are already at the end. So again, thank you. It was really amazing, which was really helpful. And it gives you many things to think of, at least for me, to revise in my life. So thank you for that. And yeah, to the audience, thank you for being so active, for participating, for also being so honest and to share. And we hope to see you next time.
Great. Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone. Take care. Have a great evening. Ciao.
Good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.